I've traveled around the country, I've seen the dusty plains, but I'd rather be back home again, avoiding all the rains. Sat around the table with the culture running deep, with a harvest in the jaws and promises to keep. Give me a home out in the bush, please, with lots of more trees, a bung or two, me mate Wildroo and the rest of the crew, with Timmy, Tink and Mud too. We've got a strong culture and some good stuff to share, with the microbial plan and the science in the air. Got the masters of the craft and the crew's all there, in me old smoking chair. Give me a home out in the bush, please, with lots of more trees, a bung or two, me mate Wildroo and the rest of the crew, with Timmy, Tink and Mud too.
G'day legends, and welcome back to the Terpene Table. This week, Mud and I sit down with Eloise from the Zomia Cannabis Collective, a collective working directly with farmers in Thailand's highlands to help document, preserve, and ethically represent traditional landrace genetics. Zomia takes its name from the greater Zomia region, a vast mountainous area spanning parts of Southeast Asia, known for its independent communities and generations deep cultivation traditions. These genetics are shaped by environment, culture, and time, not trends. In this episode, we get into preservation, farmer relationships, and the realities of working in remote regions, and what happens when heirloom cultivars meet the modern global market. But before we jump in, a quick note from the table. Going forward, we're refining our interview format. To keep conversations tighter and clearer for you, interviews will now be hosted by myself and one other team member, whose specialty fits the guest. We'll still be bringing you 2 full crew table episodes every month, the whole crew around the mic, but our interviews will be more focused, more dialed in. Alright, let's get into it. Eloise, welcome. Glad you could make it.
Thank you. Super chuffed to be here. Love talking with Aussies.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I think we'll probably just dive straight into it then. I think Mud's got some questions for you guys, kicking off just around genetics, and then we'll move forward from there.
Yeah, a little bit about genetics. I think a little bit about like the interpretation, understanding of landrace, that sort of thing. What do you reckon we should touch on first, Roo?
Maybe interpretation of landrace might be a good one, just so everyone's got a bit
Alrighty.
of an idea.
Do you want to ask that one or me, mate? Because that one's
Go for it.
that one's in it. Yeah, I'll go for that one then. So what do you think? What do you think landraces are? What's your interpretation of it? Because to my understanding, the word landrace has been not bastardized, but obviously it was first defined and then redefined, and there's a lot of different opinions on it, and some people tend to think that it means feral and that's it, or wild, and obviously that's not the case. However, it could be a feral or wild plant. But I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes in the cannabis community, people want to reinvent the wheel and are getting the surface level, and it leads to a lot of confusion because people are just repeating their surface level understanding of the topic. As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty well defined. There's not really too much ambiguity. What's really happened is that we've expanded our definition of landrace over time, and we've applied it to other crops and that's required a little bit of nuance in terms of clarifying how it would apply to other crops. And so, given that it was first a term applied to pigs, there was a journey until we started using it as our word for, well, what it is in the cannabis community. But nothing's really changed. There's never been a back and forth between one scientist saying, hey, it's wild, and then another saying it's not. No one's ever said that it's wild. That's just a complete misconception that has come up organically among the community, just through a misunderstanding, I suppose. The definition of landrace cannabis is, I would say, as succinctly as possible, traditional cannabis cultivar or varietal, cultivated within its traditional context. So it's pretty hard to separate the two from each other. You can take the seed from a landrace population and grow it elsewhere, but what you've then grown is no longer a landrace. Or if it is, it would then be what would be called an exogamous landrace. An exogamous landrace rather than an autochthonous landrace. So you've got your you've essentially got populations that are autochthonous, right, indigenous, and those would be populations that are in northeastern China or wherever Kashgar, or wherever the origins of cannabis will turn out to be, and then everything else was brought there at some point or other in history, and so the most ambiguous is how long does it take for something to be considered traditional, or how long does it take for something to be considered indigenous than brought somewhere? Because ultimately everything was brought there, from somewhere else other than the original weed, so to speak. The definition does include that status, and so we've expanded the definition from just pigs to more crops, and in the process we've expanded our understanding of land races. From the other crucial thing that's happened is that we've stopped thinking of them as sort of relics and now understand them as more dynamic populations. And so there's always been gene flow. There was never a period where there was a pure landrace, because landraces are the result of human migrations and trading.
I'm actually glad you finished with that. That was a very good definition, because that actually leads into my next question. And I saw you released an article recently in your Discord. I haven't been able to dive deeply into it, but it was about ABC, Aussie Bastard Cannabis, and it leads into a question I have. Are you aware of, or do you know of any sort of cultivars or lineages or genetics that would be considered Australian land races at this point?
No, I do not. There's no evidence for it, frankly. There are some rumors, and there are some things that maybe point in that direction, but until we clear up a few things and find some more data points, I don't think it would be right to say that there's any such thing. Now, the article that we released was specifically addressing this. Essentially, what we uncovered is it's a little bit of a throwaway almost, because it's not the main thrust of the document. The main thrust of the document is a herbarium of the species of eastern Indonesia and, let's call it, say, Wallacea in eastern Indonesia. And cannabis is the specific sort of sub-article that's at hand. And there's a little mention of a third kind of cannabis beyond the first two that are mentioned. And the first two are male and female cannabis plants. And so the third type was described as Papuan cannabis. And Papuan cannabis was described as being very wrinkly with weird looking leaves, essentially. And that, does sound quite a lot like what ABC looks like. And so I have heard speculation that ABC is in fact Australian, but I think that that's not accurate. I don't think it's actually Australian. I think that if it does turn out to be something that is naturally occurring, it's probably Papuan, because the first reference to it is coming from Papua. And it's described as coming from two places, from the Sula Islands and Papua. But that doesn't mean that those are the only two places where you'd find it. So what's implied by that is that it's grown by Papuan ethnic groups, of which there are lots of different Papuan ethnic groups, or groups that could be categorized as Papuan ethnic groups. And it's an ethnological distinction, right? Like the author was distinguishing between like the various Malay groups, like the Austronesians and the Papuans. And so he was saying there's Malay ganja, which comes from Java, which may not be true, but at the very minimum, it didn't come from the Spice Islands. And then there was native cannabis, which was grown by the sort of, by the Papuans, who, they're the original inhabitants of that area. And so it suggests suggests an ancient origin. I mean, just a little bit of constructive context. Plants were domesticated by the Papuans, right? There's a few different great centers of agricultural domestication events. Everybody knows Mesopotamia, where grain was domesticated, or rice in the Yangtze River. I think not enough people are aware that in Papua they domesticated banana and taro and a lot of other extremely important crops. There was a real knowledge of plant breeding that survives up until this day in areas like the Cook Swamp. I mean, you should see the gardens that these tribes keep. They're fucking gorgeous and so productive and well organized. It's really not crazy to think that they were breeding cannabis, and that's a narrative that we see basically all over the place. Like I'm in Cambodia right now, and people want to attribute later origins because they're a little bit more certain, but it's not the case, right? So like people are like, oh, like the Bunong in northeastern Cambodia, they don't smoke weed. The one person in the record to them smoking weed was like someone being like, I don't know what that plant is. Like, there's some botanist who recorded the women in the Benong community smoking weed. And it was like, it was growing it was so common that they didn't even talk about it. It was just so common they didn't even need to note it. And I think that's a common trend. I think that cannabis used to be far more ubiquitous than it is now. And so it was so banal that it wasn't worth recording. So yeah.
And only
then
recently,
as far as Australia
like
goes, I'm not an expert, but pardon?
I think there's a bit of latency issue. I was agreeing and saying, I think it was only a recent issue, the last 60, 80, 100 years where it became something that was spoken about, the consumption of it, and it wasn't normal like all medicines or all herbs from your garden.
Right. It just makes, finding evidence really hard. But I don't think that there's any strong evidence that points to Australia. The closest we've got is circumstantial. As far as my digging in the record goes, it seems like pre-colonial contact, Makasaris, Trepang collectors, those sea cucumbers, they were collecting those in the Arafura Sea off the coast of Arnhem Land, and they had contact with the Tiwi Islanders and among others, and there's archaeological evidence of tobacco and such up there in Arnhem Land. So it's not. I don't think it's crazy to think that there was cannabis. The evidence that we're looking at points to cannabis in the area up to 2,000 years ago or more. And so it seems it's not that far across the ocean, is it? It's really pretty close.
So no, it's not. That I guess sort of leads me to the next question that rolls with that. I guess would be how long does something have to exist in an ecosystem before you'd be able to consider it a landrace or a neo-landrace, I guess, as you say, because they're not genetically wild as such either.
Yeah, how long is a piece of string? What's we'd have to define so many things first, like what's traditional, who counts as a community. There's just a lot of answers.
What counts as cultivation, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, like you put it this way, like once it's gone to that point, you'll know it, right? Like if you're in, it probably isn't. How's that?
Yeah, that's
like once it becomes so widespread, and yeah.
Also, I'm under the impression. So there's a lot of very psychedelic and psychoactive plants in our country, in Australia, and the people that were here long ago, they consumed a lot of these. So I couldn't imagine cannabis was very powerful or medicinal to them in the way that some of the things they consume regularly was. They had a lot of very powerful substances. So I'm not sure they
really
cultivated. They also weren't cultivators. So they weren't cultivators in that way.
Yeah, the land offered so much.
Yeah, I can't
they
speak too much on Indigenous Australians, but really insightful point you just made. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. What do you got for us, sir?
Well, I could go quite a few ways, I reckon. Let's dive into your philosophy on modern and landrace and breeding. So, do you see modern cross landrace as a dilution and evolution, or both?
Great question. Both. Yeah, both.
Okay, so does that leads me to the next one?
I don't have any
then.
beef
Is there a
with
right way to modernize?
Oh, that's another great question. Wow. I suppose so, but I also don't suppose that you can plan it or predict it. I mean, these things could only be judged in retrospect, can't they? So the person making the judgment has to judge, right, like the human cost and the cost of the environment and everything else, and then I suppose the benefits. Put it this way, I am too French to answer that question well. That's a very utilitarian way of looking at the world, and I have to, it just strikes me as alien to calculate things to that degree. Yeah, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That answers my question as well, because
it definitely does. I guess it's a personal and philosophical, and so it's an everything question. I guess that's an all-encompassing one.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfectly human response you gave, so I appreciate it. Okay, so what was the moment that you realised landrace preservation would be your life path? Because let's admit it, you're pretty well committed to it now.
Late. Way too late. That's a real God. You guys got a lot of really good questions. I suppose I must have reached some point which I haven't grasped yet, but there must have been when I realized, like, I remember when I noticed other people reaching that point. Like, I remember when, like, for example, my mom, who's like, you know, she does some random stuff for us every now and again, and she fucking hates weed, and I like to tease her about it. And so I was like, you know, they're gonna write a book about weed someday, and your name's gonna be in it. And she was just fucking raging.
That's hilarious, but good on her for getting involved anyway.
I hope she knows how significant what she's doing is.
Yeah, I suppose there's a moment when I realized that this is important and it's worth doing, and I suppose the more you do it and the more connections you make and the more people you meet, the more I guess it's another calculation which I'm not consciously doing, but if you ask me to calculate it, I'd say it's like this idea of like letting people down and of ego and pride in myself as well, of like wanting to like do something like for the world, for the community, which you know, it's not a generous thing
in a way that you feel you can.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying, is that it's I mean, it is. That's functionally what it is, but it's an ego thing, right? Like it's a point I'm trying to make, I suppose, to myself.
Yep.
And I'm not really sure when it sunk in that I'd really made that fucking point, but I suppose it must have been a couple years back. We did have a moment about 9 months ago when I was trying to cram all these field reports into from West Bengal into our website, and I was like, man, I'm defining the same terms over and over again. I was like, I got to make a glossary. And so I started doing a glossary, and then the glossary expanded to like fucking 9,000 terms or some shit like that. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, like this is going to take forever. Like I'm going to spend the rest of my life defining Moroccan water pipes and how they relate to Bedouin culture in the 16th century, and I guess that's fucking cool. You know?
Actually, can I ask something while you touch on that? What other
Sure.
so what other craftsmen and crafts and trades and skills do the other villagers, farmers, and community members within the collective have? Not just the farmers. Do any of them make glass and, as you say, water pipes? Like, what other skills do you think they could bring to the world?
Oh my God. I mean, everything. Like, you know, they're people, so they do all the things, right? The reason that they're still growing land races is because they're typically still within this traditional system of agriculture, which means the lifestyle associated with subsistence farming, right? And so, yeah, I mean, like all sorts of knowledge and skills that we've forgotten about. So one community that we met them because, or we went to meet them because one of the members, there's like fucking 80 of them left, right? They've been genocided and disappearing. They're the indigenous people of southern Cambodia on the coast, Chong people, and they have a tradition of coaxing elephants from the wild by in the forest by playing music to the elephants using specific leaves that they use as a flute, so leaf flute, and and they have all this like rich catalog of music that they play in different contexts, and but when the elephants went extinct in the wild, suddenly all this it's the tree goes missing and the weather changes, like all these little subtle environmental changes translate to one less song being played. And then in the modern world, like the purpose of these traditions and these rituals and these skills, they're just curiosities for most people, right? They don't serve any productive purpose, and thus capitalism can't do anything with it, and thus it's a fucking waste of time or something like that. And I don't know, I could go on for days about all the different, you know, things, but I think the leaf flute was probably the one that captured my imagination the most, because I was with a member of the collective who was helping us out a lot at that time, and she's from a community in southern Thailand that's a bit, you know, distinct and unique. And this guy playing the leaf flute was playing a dirge, you know, like a funeral song, and then she recognized it and she started doing like the temple dance that she'd learned to go with that song. And these guys were freaking out. They were like, "How the fuck do you know that dance? That's like a fucking secret dance kind of thing." And I was like watching this from a distance, like, what the fuck? This is crazy. Yeah. There's I don't know. There's a lot of ways that capitalism could. There's lots of medicines and techniques and products that capitalism has yet to sort of identify and incorporate into its economic processes in the highlands of Southeast Asia and South Asia. And but what captures me more than sort of those is more the art and the music and the nature and the relationships that people have with those things, and I find that truly fascinating. Yeah,
That's it's interesting how many different sort of cultures you can find, which create situations like you mentioned with the traditional dance and whatnot. You also mentioned other medicines that they have to offer. What sort of medicines are you talking about? And does the collective ever have plans to sort of utilize their network in the same way they have for the landrace genetics for these other medicines, the seeds for other medicines?
sure. I can't really speak with much authority on indigenous plant medicine beyond cannabis, but safe to say that for communities who live outside of the reach of modern clinics and such, and even for those who do, but you know, old-fashioned or whatnot, there are a lot of remedies that are incorporated into their daily lifestyle that
Absolutely, yeah.
we don't know about yet, that I'm sure the pharmaceutical industry would like to find value. I mean, this is a big thing, you know, the stevia, for example, was recently developed from a plant that indigenous people in Latin America were using, and they made billions of dollars developing stevia product, and the community got fuck all except their forest cut down, you know. So I'm a little bit not only hesitant to go too much to that, but I also frankly just don't even know what there is beyond, some pretty surface level things. And then there's a two-part question. What was the second part of the question again? Would you remind me?
Of course. Would the collective ever plan
You asked me
to
if the
sort of?
collective. Yeah.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So I didn't mean to cut you off. I think there's a delay. Yeah, we'd love to. I was joking about it. I joke about it all the time. Because I was talking about it on the Future Cannabis podcast today, and it just comes up all the time. The cannabis community is one of the few communities who is passionate enough to actually sit there and watch YouTube videos about their favorite plant. Like people who like tomatoes,
Yes.
even if they really fucking
Sometimes
like
so.
tomatoes, are not watching podcasts on the origins of tomatoes for the most part. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, definitely.
And unfortunately, that's an ecosystem that's really important, right? Like you need donations, you need people to fund the project, and no one's paying attention to the 14th varietal of wild watercress from the Gambia that's gone extinct in the last. You know what I mean? Not only is it endless. Yeah. So thank you, cannabis nerds, for doing what you do and smoking your weed. I'll light up to that, and cheers to hopefully, keeping some of the remnants in the hands of the community in a meaningful way.
Agreed. Definitely.
I've got one. I've got one. I was thinking, so do the farmers actually understand the genetic value of what they hold, or is it just cultural and traditional knowledge to them?
That's another interesting question. I think it's got a pretty obvious answer, but I don't want to go there. You heard the story of like the rich man and the fisherman, and he's like, "You got to get a bigger boat, dude." And it goes on and on. And he's like, "Why,
Yeah.
why?" And then eventually he gets. He's like, "Well, the reason why is so that you can sit there and fucking enjoy your sex at the fucking beach and enjoy the sunset and go fishing when you want, kind of thing." And it's like, some people who live in traditional communities that are outside of the globalized economy aspire to being part of the global economy. In fact, I would say a lot of people do. And that's the kind of person that you need to be, or just be someone who's born in the globalized economy to have that mentality to sort of see value like that. The whole thing is it's about leverage, right? Like you as an Australian are able to see the leverage. Not that they couldn't, innately, or even if it was explained to them, but there's just no social or economic context that guides people to that, right? It's just the plant that you grow. It's just what everyone grows. It's your crop. It's as banal as growing tomatoes. And then in the context of the prohibition, then it changes. In the context of the prohibition, suddenly it has a really high value as a cash crop, and then the mechanics change somewhat. But if we're talking about like in a sort of untouched community that's never been hassled for growing their weed, and then absolutely not. They absolutely don't see the value in it because, like, what the fuck is a stock exchange? Like, how does that even make sense, right? Like, but I was born in a globalized economy and I fucking studied economics, and I'm still asking what the fuck is a stock exchange.
Cool.
So I don't know.
That leads me to my next question then. So that's well said. So how do you guys balance your preservation versus like accidentally not commercializing local communities and extracting from them? And have you ever walked away
I
from
just need to
collecting
make it clear, like,
because it didn't feel ethically right?
sorry, I missed out on that because I thought that was the question was
Sorry.
over. Could you say
No,
that
that's
again?
all right. I just wanted to add that little last bit in, which was just, have you ever walked away from collecting genetics because it didn't feel ethically right?
Yeah, Bella was there actually the last time that it happened. Yeah, we were in Bengal, and I almost don't want to say the name of the community. I'm not going to say the name of the community. So basically, there's this community that's super rare. There's like less than fucking 2,000 of them, and I don't even want to say too much more than that in case anyone is trying to fucking find out who they are. But basically, it's a group that's just been left on their own for the most part, and they don't have that much contact with the outside world. They speak, the young people speak English, etc. But their village is cut off from the rest of the world by a fucking huge river with no bridges that floods most of the year. The only time you can really cross it is when it's dry, and it's not dry all the time. And they we'll probably never get to the bottom of it, but I didn't even want to. But basically, I got the impression that, and they told me, they were like, the elders hate it and don't like it because it attracts negative attention and brings us problems. But I love to smoke it, kind of thing. That's what the young guy was telling me. And I was like, do you guys have plants in your village? And he was like, hella. And I'm like, fuck. Like, if I put this in the historical record, if I put this in the record, like, there's always going to be that reference that these people grow weed, and eventually somebody will come sniffing. And I didn't think it was right because I could not determine whether from what they were saying, they haven't always grown weed. And weed is like a new thing in their community. And so I was like, I don't want to fucking, even if they were growing the best shit in the world, I wouldn't want to know about it because this is like a very traditional community who's in modernizing, and cannabis seems to be one of the things that was introduced to them. And it seems like most of the community doesn't like it, with the exception of the young people who are westernized. And I was like, I don't want anything to do with that. See you guys later. Enjoy your fucking forest. It looks fucking sick.
I think that's an ethically beautiful stance to take on that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I have some questions on the people themselves, and obviously won't go too deep, and I may come across a little ignorant because I am on these subjects. So are they consuming traditional landrace genetics from their region, or are they acquiring sort of modern genetics or neighboring regions to consume? And how are they consuming it? And sort of, are they using our modern methods?
They're smoking. We're talking India here, so fucking chillums, and don't matter who you are, don't matter what caste or religion you were born into, you're Shiaing with the rest of them. And like there's not too many questions asked, and the genetics, like, there's no tribal village cut off from the rest of the world by a river who's ordering Barney's Farms or fucking something like that. It's Bengali people, right? Bengali people who, same as we were just talking about, they see the leverage, right? Like, they trying to leverage something in their life, more income probably, and they're like, shit, I can sell weed to this community. Boom. That's just simple as that. And then obviously with local villagers, like, I don't want to buy the shit. I'd rather just grow it. Done. That's it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there is more to it than that, but I suppose I was making it seem like I had evidence of that happening. That was the impression I got.
I mean, as you said, you got a bad feeling and you stepped away from it, so there's not really much more that you could have explored. But no, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
You got anything else to fire us off with on that, Matt?
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting because the methods of consuming and whatnot lead me into some of my other questions. These ones are a little more specific. Like, I specifically really enjoy the Himalayan regions in terms of, like, just a little bit, just the plants and their culture around it and how they all sort of gather for their meets with their charas, their temple balls, and everything like that. I'm also very ignorant on that as well. So what sort of, in your travels, what are the various sorts of drying methods and curing methods across the different, landrace varieties and the people that cultivate them?
I suppose the first distinction to make would be loose curing flowers, or an extraction technique or not, right? And then if it's not an extraction technique like charas, then it's going to be either loose cured, like, modern style, or some form of compression curing, whether mild or strong compression. And there's obviously a lot of variables. Nah, I think that's a word that gets bandied around a lot, but I'm not seeing any yeast-driven processes. There may be some enzymatic processes that are underlying the compression curing. In fact, it's very likely that there are, but I couldn't really tell you specifically which pathways those processes are following. But I can say with a pretty strong degree of confidence that it's not fermentation. It'll be some kind of enzymatic process, and of course, photooxidation, which is enough. It's enough. There also might be some microbial stuff going on. Sorry, I got to stretch my legs. And the compression is different wherever you go, really. There's certainly some sort of archetypes, I suppose. The main one would be, to wrap entire branches and to compress in some form or another, whether that be like a really tight wrapping like the Malawi cob, or something a lot looser like they do in West Bengal, which is just basically, cutting down the plant, putting all the branches, in a bundle, and then wrapping it up with some plastic wrap, hang it off with some string, and you leave it in there for the final part of the cure, and it takes on a much more flattened, elongated shape. And then everything in between, right? Like that's just sort of the two opposite ends of the compression spectrum, right? Like strong and light compression, and then obviously loose curing, which is just so much more common these days. But it's really not. I just don't like loose cured weed that much. I think that if it's done really well, it can be good. But for the most part, varieties that are adapted to the places that we work are adapted to this heat and this humidity, and as a result, they have a decent amount of foxtailing and this kind of open and loose structure, which it's great for a lot of things, right? It's really great for extraction. It's really great for getting sunshine right into the nooks and crannies, and getting some really high THC levels relative to sort of plant material. But it also, because it's so loose, it's a lot of surface area exposed to oxygen, and the cultural standard and norm within the community pretty much everywhere in the world these days is for dense flowers. And a part of the reason for that is because this expectation of extremely strong terpenes and stuff, which frankly I have too, these of course in your weed. But a lot of these sort of, let's say, sativas and equatorial plants are just so loose that they just photo-oxidize really, really quickly and lose a lot of their more delicate, volatile aromas very quickly through this photo-oxidation process. And so that's why the compression curing occurs, because in the age before refrigeration, it was a really good way of homogenizing the THC levels throughout the material. And that does a couple things. Notably, it forms like a kind of patina on the outside of the flowers, which functionally achieves the same thing that we do with genetics, but through post-processing, right? So the end result is a dense nug with the inside that's still fresh, so to speak, right? Because the outside is like the protective shell. We achieve that these days through just pure fucking thickness. They did it through kind of like, wrapping or compressing such that either the patina is formed by like the cannabinoids like kind of oozing into the mass, or bruising the sort of the outside of the block. When you bruise and it's still a little bit wet, it goes black and then it dries out real fucking quick because you've broken all the cells inside the plant, versus not bruising it when it dries very slowly, because first you need to dry out all the xylem in the cell walls, and then the liquids inside the cells can dry out. And then as far as drying goes, pretty much everybody's drying outdoors in some capacity, or at least semi-outdoors, or if it is fully indoors, it's not with a really good climate control. And that's another big hindrance as far as if you were to go out there to try and taste landrace genetics in the countries of origin, you really need to be there for harvest and check out what either in the field, especially if you want to smell the terpenes, because a lot of these post-processing methods are just not leaving many terpenes around. The other interesting thing to note is that most of the communities that I've worked with do not value terpenes. So, for example, there are some who do produce a product that's capable of being extremely terpy, and they don't want it to be terpy. So when they do produce a really terpy product, they specifically age it to get rid of the terps, because they say that the strong taste, while delicious, it coats the back of your throat in an oil when you smoke it, and that oil is bad for your throat. And they say that if you smoke very terpy weed for weeks and months on end, you'll develop a cough And that's actually backed up by science. It seems like the most recent findings is that turns out modern weed for you is even worse than we thought because of the amount of terps, and terps are caustic. You know, you've probably heard about, like, I don't know, some friend's aunt who's like super into essential oils who like fucking overdosed on lavender oil or something. That's a real thing. Like essential oils from plants are potent, and cannabis is no exception. And when you're consuming, you know, that the sheer quantity of milligrams of, you know, pure fucking limonene and stuff like that, it will damage, irritate, and inflame the lining of your insides, and certainly your lungs. And so absolutely.
And
absolutely.
you're
And
right.
so
We do, and we consider it a good thing in our sort of our Western cultures of smoking. We do consider
well, of
that
course
a
we
good
do,
thing.
because it
sit there
tastes
and we
great.
cough
But
and
that's
Well,
what
it's coat of our mouth. It's delicious.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a definitely and you're right. You know, these materials aren't in these, and we are striving for these higher numbers, these higher terpenes, things like this. And that's a good point. I wonder if we are going to get to a limit where we start to discover, or we do all start encountering some sort of medical issues from it.
Well, and then I suppose if you look at something like
we
limonene,
are
which is
definitely already there. No one has done longitudinal studies on the effects of cannabis, which is 25% cannabinoids and fucking 17% terpenes, and then another 8% of volatile sulfur compounds. And then someone who smokes fucking, you know, like, no study is following people who smoke an ounce a week or even more. I mean, I smoke like fucking, I smoke 100 grams a week. And if that shit is loud, like, I feel it, avoid the thing I sleep, and the more I smoke, the deeper it fucking gets. So this is a personal thing for me. But yeah, like all the ancients, all the old people that I speak to that smoke weed, they're all about that hay. They're all about, you know, getting rid of all that chlorophyll, and they're about transforming the molecules inside those trichomes into more complex arrangements, right? So what we really value right now as a community and as a culture is primary flavors and primary components. Like, we're just discovering the building blocks like THC and fucking whatever else, and we're just like, that's great, more of that. It's just so, like, it's so childish.
It's the same with sugar.
It's hilarious
We
to
do the
think
same
that
with
people
sugar.
in
yeah,
people in
sweets and
Amsterdam
lollies
and
and all that.
California, they think of themselves as the cannabis elite, and they'll absolutely shit on some fucking West Bengali bushweed and be like, what the fuck is that trash? But they just don't get it. Like, that trash you can smoke all fucking day, and it makes you feel good in your body and in your mind, and it doesn't damage your health. So I was like, fuck, that's why I smoke weed. Like, if I want to taste really delicious things, you know what I do? I eat strawberries. I eat lemons. If I want to smell the fucking most complicated incense smell in the world, I'll buy some fucking oud and burn that. Like, my joint doesn't need to be like fucking truffles and caviar, you know? Like, it's yeah. That's the way I'm looking at it. Yeah,
and that's actually good, because that leads into my next question about, you know, amongst these different methods, and you've probably tried more than most people of the various methods that date back a lot more than our methods. What was your favorite? What gave you the best effects? What was the best sort of dry cure and extracts you sort of came across?
My next question, brother.
Charas for sure. Like, first time, there's just no question. Like, good charas is unbeatable. Like, the first time I smoked some, you know, it's hilarious because, like, I'm inherently a little bit of a snob, you know, and it's the French in me. But I also, like, I used to be in the wine industry, and I talk about that quite a lot because I think it's quite relevant, and there's a lot of fucking snobbery there. And so when I first started smoking charas and such, I heard a lot about Milana and the various villages in Milana and how it was the best. And given my background with snobs, I was like, that's bullshit, you know? Like, I've tried the world's best wines and they're fucking great, but I don't, you know, I still drink, you know, like cheap bottles of wine for the most part, right? Like, that's where it's at. quality, price, stories, everything, you know, like once you get over a certain price, all you're paying for is prestige. And I really sort of applied that same logic to Charis. And so when people were hyping up the Milana, I knew myself that what I had smoked so far was good, but not so much better than, say, Resol or La Paz or something like that. It was worth making all the fuss that people were making, right? So like I'd smoked really good fucking Charis from Dot stuff, and I was like, I was like, the stuff I smoked from Milana, yeah, it's great, but it's not that much better. And then one year we had a tour group come out with us in Himachal, and so the way that works is that we do like a dry run of the tour with just the staff, so that we can go everywhere ahead of time and purchase like a shit ton of hash, so that don't tell anyone, so that we can smoke it on the tour. And,
allegedly.
So
everything here is AI allegedly.
So that year we had like a hash purchasing budget, which I recommend if you're ever in a position where you can ask your boss for a hash buy.
I wonder if you
budget.
Hash
That's a good thing to have.
yeah. I like it.
So I don't know. We dropped like a decent chunk of change on on a lot of fucking hash, and for the first time I spent like, because the other thing as well, just to give you a bit more context, is I've been going to Parvati since I was quite young. So my first bought in Himachal wasn't in Parvati, it was in Rampur nearby, but I paid 50 rupees, right? And then by the time I went up to Parvati, I think I was paying like 1,000 max kind of thing. And then nowadays they're asking for like fucking 10K, 12K, like it goes up to like 20. I've never heard 20, but no one's ever tried to sell me Tola for 20, but I've heard people saying that they've bought Tolas for 20. Just so you have an idea, 20 is about 200 euros, so about 250 Australian for 10 grams. So like the most expensive hand of Charis in Milana is going for about, let's say, 25 bucks Australian a gram. And I just, I'm never in a position where I'm like, I want to pay that, because I'm like, look, I can rub fucking good hash, and my friends can, like, why the fuck would I spend that much money? But that year I kind of had to, because they were coming for the tour. It's a bunch of Ganjiers, and they wanted to smoke that danky dank from a few different villages in Milana. And so, yeah, I got some friends there and I hooked it up, and I was like, all right, okay, I'm still not gonna spend that much money on it. Maybe like here's what I do. Now this is what I do. Now I just buy one hand. Like if I sell a kilo, all 10 grams of the best Milana cream, because it's too expensive, but it is the best. And I take back everything that I said before. I understand all the snobs. They were right. I was wrong. It's the best, and it is by far the best, actually. Quite similar. What has that no other has is this like it's this like incense character. Here it's just this it's such an entrancing aroma that's very hard to describe because it's so complex. But it's within the spectrum of incense aromas, and it's sort of laid on top of all the other tastes and smells that you have in the Parvati Charis, which is typically like chocolatey, kind of citrusy orange, that kind of thing. It's just truly, truly exceptional. And just to clarify, so because I personally, I don't feel like I'm a hypocrite, but it might sound a little bit hypocritical based on what I said before. These are aged charases. So I was sort of saying terpenes are bad for you, but check this out. Like, that doesn't mean you don't get to have taste. That just means you don't get to have strawberries and kiwis and lemons. Instead, what you got to go for is transformed trichomes, right? And so those are going to be, pressed, aged, whatever. And in that process, you're going to have more arrangements of all of the molecules that are in there, because you're going about this process of photooxidation, and the oxygen is degrading everything in there. And in this degrading, it's kind of like, imagine photooxidation is like raising the temperature in your pot. Things start to happen, chemical changes start to happen. and you end up with aromas and tastes that you would not find in weed that has not undergone this transformation. And if we were to appreciate those aromas and tastes as a culture, we would have no fucking problems. You could probably get away with smoking a lot more weed if that's what you wanted to do, because it seems like by nature of already having been oxidized, they're far less volatile, right? So like chemicals are always trying to stable state, and typically in those states they're I'm not so please I don't even know if this is actually truly accurate, but my impression is that it seems like they reach more stable states where they're reacting less with your body in a negative fashion. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's personal experience. So yeah, well put.
Yeah. I'll got another one on that. Sorry, Roo. I'll just because it leads directly into this. This is more of a personal question because I'm fascinated by this. The difference between, for example, your charas or your jungle ball or whatever you want to call it, in regards to something I've heard referred to in certain places, jungly or jungly, excuse my pronunciation, but it's from what I've heard, it's basically just charas from feral populations at a different time. Could you maybe elaborate on something like that if you've encountered that?
Absolutely. Not sure how much elaborating I need to do because you put it quite succinctly. That's exactly what jungly is. Jungly is it means that's where the word jungle comes from.
Interesting. Okay.
It means forest, from the
is
forest.
It treated differently in
like wild.
culture?
Pardon?
Is it treated differently in their culture? Because I know their terrace
Absolutely.
farming; those are very highly valued.
Yeah. Yeah, it's treated differently. Yeah, absolutely. There's a parallel in other cultures too. Like in Thailand, they have the mango, and then they have the mamuang, which means the wild mango, essentially. Like paes means forest, so like the mango from the forest. So yeah, it's a describing word used to sort of denote the origin, the classification, and in some contexts, I suppose the grade. Ultimately, it's charas rubbed from feral plants, and as a result, it's very diverse in its effects and contents and everything. But typically, it has a higher degree of plant matter inside, which is for some people a good thing. For a lot of people, I would say most people, it's not a good thing because it translates to less good taste. But if your goal is to maximize the medicinal effect, then jungly is often going to be the thing that you're reaching for. And a lot of the old timers and the sort of the real heads, you have to understand this as well. Like this milieu around, like in the Himalayas, maybe it's not as bad as Amsterdam, but it is all about showing off, and it's all about flexing. And like, man, like every time I go there, I have to fucking like you sit there in the cafe passing chillums, and like I have to fucking give my credentials. It feels like because people are just like, and so there's always somebody who's trying to be like, yeah, but you know the real shit. That's the fucking jungly, you know. And they're right. They are right. I would agree with them on that. But as to how many Westerners that smoke charity actually smoke jungly regularly, I think very few. But it's like like a year, 2 years, 3 years, going back and forth between Sri Lanka and Nepal, that kind of thing. And a big way that they pay for this is by selling charas. And even if they don't, they're probably smoking charas all throughout. And so it's a smart move to switch to the jungly because, bro, you can go buy like a fucking kilo of jungly for like the price of $10 of charas, right? It's much cheaper.
Okay.
And so
I really want to try some jungly.
Yeah,
it sounds incredible.
Yeah, jungly's great. Jungly's great. Yeah, go make your own jungly. In fact, I recommend all of you to come join us in the Himalayas at some point, and I'll take you around the fields and show you how to rub your own jungly and.
We plan to take you up on that one day, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, one day when we can. That actually, I've just one more quick one. Sorry, it just all sort of led into each other.
Go for it, mate. Go for it.
So, do you think you would get a good result or a similar result if you tried to do the same thing with modern genetics? So obviously, a lot of modern genetics are towards washing, as they call it, for the press the extracts, that sort of thing. Do you think you go in there a little bit earlier than you would normally, harvest it and rub some charas under your lights? Do you think that's possible?
Nah. Well, yeah, of course it's possible, but it's a waste of time. I
Okay.
think that until you go out there, you don't comprehend the scale. So like you can rub
I
charas
understand what you're
because
saying. Yeah.
like there's just so many plants. Like there's just like it's an abundant resource. So you're just like rub.
Yeah, they're not dealing with the same
One
sort of
next,
Here
process.
you're
one
like,
next,
I
one
spent
next.
9 months growing this thing from fucking seed or clone. Fucking, if I don't rub a good hand of charas, then it all goes to waste. At the very minimum, if you are going to invest that much time and money to rub your own fucking charas, come and see us first. To learn how it's done, that way your first hand won't be a total disaster, because I guarantee you it will. It seems like the most obvious thing in the world. You just rub the weed. It is fucking obvious.
Oh, no,
It is also not. It
even
is really
climate I
hard,
found from some
and you
opinion.
got to do it. Yeah, you got to have the right sun. You got to have the right temperatures. Plants got to be the right development, and like you are also trying to gauge all those things, by interpreting signals that there are obvious, right? So like there, you don't need to ask, when do I harvest? Fucking everyone else is harvesting. You can see people rubbing fucking hands everywhere. You're like, all right, now's the time. It's just a whole different world, and rubbing is a part of it. And I would love to say that you can incorporate rubbing and charas to your lifestyle, but I don't see many people who grow either the right type of cannabis nor of the right amount to really make that a worthwhile endeavor. If you have enough money to that much growing, you've definitely got a flight's like what, $400 once you're, yeah, it's so cheap. So like, it really is not breaking the bank to go do it in Upper Dash. If you fancy it as well, you just
It
fucking
costs you
pop
more to try and do
down
one
to
at
Goa,
home than it does to get on
and
a plane.
yeah, basically what I'm saying. But you would need the right types of plants, and typically these charas plants are more open in structure because you're trying to extract every last gland manually with your hands, and so you want access to every last gland, and so density is the last thing that you would want in flowers for charas, and who has access to genetics like that, right? If you really want to try out some of our Himalayan stuff and see what some of the guys in America tried recently.
I had intentions of that.
Yeah. You can do it, but it's an endeavor, and just understand that you're doing it for the fun of it. Do not convince yourself that you can make charas commercially, like
Well,
on
I
a
think we're
small
waiting
scale.
on a
Like,
little
I'm
care
gonna
package
fucking...
from you ladies, so that might be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, try it even on a small scale level. And I sort of finished that question off with, do you think, the opposite? Do you think you could, sort of some of these Himalayan genetics? I've seen a very nice black one that from a village up there that you guys have that's very, very nice looking. Anyway, sort of that we can use for modern methods. Are there any sort of Himalayan land races that we could use to wash and press and for our modern sort of methods? But yeah, that's something I'd like to try as well.
That's the main reason why we think people would be interested in these. So you've got like a dumper, perfect terpene profile that you like, whatnot. Fucking pop a male Himalayan in there and see what that does to the flower structure. If anything, it's just going to open it up a little bit, and you're just going to have an easier time washing, for example. If you're looking to introduce some sort of terpene profile or some resistance that you find in landrace varietals that you don't elsewhere, or if you want to do your own breeding, those would be the main sort of use cases for land races, I suppose. And then if you're really quite brave and enterprising, I'm waiting for the day that somebody starts growing out landrace varietals and doing extractions with it and offering those on the market, right? Like I know for a fact that there's people out there who would pay hundreds of dollars per gram for single fucking grams of rosin and whatnot from specific land races, because that just does not exist on the market.
Well, being a breeder myself, this was
It's just
something I was
unavailable.
excited to dive
Exactly.
into when we managed to get our hands on some of these land races that were coming, and I was going to try and use some of these modern washing genetics and put some landrace through it and try and open up the bud site and the flower a little bit more and see if we can extract a little bit more from these fresh frozen and washing. And I think it could be very interesting.
Yeah, I also had a lot of interest
sure.
in just growing the traditional land races myself for the exact methods we just spoke about for extracting with our modern methods. Like, could you imagine some of the flavors, the profiles, the medicinal properties that we could open that it's just been so bottlenecked in modern genetics, you know? And as you know, I would love
Yeah.
just to see what's in there because we have no idea, you know, the genetic pool in there, some of the outliers we could find, but yeah. I'd love to hunt through some of them as well sometime and find some stuff for Roo to mix with some of his modern stuff that he looks through, some of his modern washes and stuff. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great
Well,
response.
guys,
I'm glad we got a good response from that.
should, yeah, well, if you want to, we can schedule another talk and we can go a little bit more into detail about the mechanics of breeding land races and perhaps some of the interesting crosses that are yet to be made.
Oh
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
there's a
I
whole
intend
lot
to
to
document
cover
all
on
this
that
too.
subject.
Yeah, this is like a passion thing for me. Yeah. No, excellent. What do you think, Roo? That sounds good, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. I'd love to touch base again
Yeah,
and come
yeah.
back and revisit some of this
Good.
and dive a bit
But guys,
deeper.
unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut it short. Yeah, we have to because I can't stay much longer, and I'd really like to keep talking with you guys. You guys are really great. The questions that you ask are wonderful. I really appreciate that. I've sometimes complained a little bit about the questions that I get asked, so I really like it. But yeah, unfortunately I'm leaving the country. I'm leaving in like 3
Appreciate
hours
that.
to go to the airport. I like, need to go pack and shit. We're going to Sri Lanka
Yeah,
to do
no,
some
that's
seed
fine. We
collecting
appreciate that.
before
Well, I
going to
appreciate you
India.
taking your time.
Oh, I wish I had more of it for you. I really would be more generous if I did. But I think Bella, honestly, if I were you, I'd be asking Bella about what she got up to in Uttarakhand. There's a lot of interesting there. Bella joined the team just over a year ago, and since then she's been a part of three, four of the two major seed collecting expeditions and like 4 seed collecting expeditions in total. And she's been gaining a lot of experience and insight that I don't have. So if you've got any interest in the sort of the central Himalayan region, not really, more like the eastern part of the western Himalayas, that's where Bella was. And yeah, some pretty crazy stories going up into the villages into Tibet and all that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, the Himalayas is where I have a lot of interest. So definitely, if we could talk about stuff like this again, yeah.
Yeah, or if
For sure.
Bella's available to turn on a mic and have a bit of a chat and take over where you've left off, that would be great too. Eloise, thank you
On
so
that note,
much.
guys,
I'm going to leave you with one last question. In 200 years, do you think
Sure.
humans will be blamed for the loss of cannabis biodiversity?
Yeah, probably. There's always some kind out there being like those fucking bastards. Like there's always someone putting right, like. But I don't know. I'm not so cynical. Like I last night I was at a bar and this guy was like, like, oh, we're all parasites, and I don't see it that way. I think that is a very narcissistic way to look at things. Like, we are just as much a part of nature as anything else, or maybe it's a religious way of seeing things that I just don't share that experience. But yeah, I just like yeah, we obviously have our excesses, and certainly we do evil things, and we might even be grossly negligent with things that are sort of in our care. But it's a little bit hard for me to describe cannabis as in our care. Put it this way: like, did we domesticate cats, or did cats domesticate us? It's a really good question. The more you think about it, frankly. The cannabis plant
as well.
has
It's
spread.
kind of domesticated us.
Yeah, it's spread far beyond its native range. There's more cannabis now than there was before. What is cannabis is gold. Is that ulterior motive? Is it secretly trying to dominate the world? I doubt it. But if we were to ask it, maybe it would just be happy that there was more. But I don't know. Not to erase the very real issue which you've underlined, right? Like loss of biodiversity is a crisis and it's a horrible thing. I think that I don't know. Fucking blame fucking oil execs and the Epstein class. Those are the fuckers. And there's fuck all else to blame, really. I mean, like it really all
Said. I like it.
Yep,
I'm
100%.
on board with that.
boils down to them,
That's a
doesn't
good
it?
way, yeah.
Well, that's my take anyway. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers. Here.
No, we'll let you go so you can make that flight and we don't end up being the reason.
Yep. But appreciate your time, Eloise. Thank you very much. And we'll
See you
touch base
guys.
again
Much love.
and we'll get you back.
I can't wait to do this again.
No, thank you for coming.
That was fantastic. Having
Brilliant.
a chat with Eloise. Hopefully Bella is there and she can hear us. Hopefully she turns on her mic. Thank you to the crew down in the audience having a listen and being involved in the chat there.
Yep, thanks to everyone that showed up, and stayed and listened. This has been a good one. This has been a personal one I've wanted for a long time. So
Yeah, it's definitely been one on the cards. So it was really good to get it checked off. And
Discord's a bit of a funny platform. We might be having some issues there or something.
okay, well look, I'm happy to leave it there anyway because
Gives us some questions for next time because I'd love to do this again.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll load it up for next time, and hopefully we can have Bella join us then and get involved a bit. That would be great because I'd love to hear some of the stories that Eloise was saying she has to share. So
Definitely, because the Himalayas and especially up in sort of that snow line and some of those terraces, that really fascinates me, especially that extract side of things and using those genetics. So
yeah,
and the culture, they're fascinating. Yeah.
Yep. Well said, mate. And that was our chat with Eloise from the Zomia Cannabis Collective. Thanks to everyone that joined us this week on the Terpene Table. We'll catch you again next week. Cheers. This episode of the Terpene Table is brought to you by Growers Pal. Aussie legends when it comes to keeping your clones safe in transit. If you've ever tried to post a cutting wrapped in wet paper towel and cling wrap, you'll know it's a gamble at best. Growers Pal clone shippers take the guesswork out of it. Purpose built with segmented compartments to keep your genetics snug, and even a little LED light to keep them happy on the road. Whether they're headed up the coast or across the country, you can trust your prize cuts will land fresh, not fried. They're mates of the Roo and they're mates of the Discord, so you know their growers looking out for you, not just trying to sell you something. Head over to growerspal.com.au. That's www.growerspal.com.au and sort yourself out with a proper kit for moving your genetics across the country. Because good clones deserve a fair dinkum safe ride.
At Blazing Trail, we're on a joyful adventure celebrating life, love, and nature's beauty. We cultivate vibrant outdoor connections, foster community collaborations, and source wholesome treasures like our Sprout seed starter for precise, energy-efficient germination and FlexiGerm silicone seed pods for sustainable, airflow-enhanced sprouting. All with the care for our world. Join us in blazing a sustainable trail filled with laughter and magic. Visit blazingtrail.com.au.
While we're on the subject of good gear, I'm going to give a cheeky shout out to my own spot, the Wild Vault. It's packed with glass, gadgets, and grow gear. All the little treasures that make your sesh just that bit sweeter. So, if you're looking for something fresh to add to your kit, swing by the wildvault.xyz and have a sticky beak. It's basically a toy box for grown-up stoners. And hey, if it's genetics you're chasing, head over to our mates at wildrootcultivars.com and check out what they've got cooking. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time at the Terpene Table.
Give me a home out in the bush, please, with lots of mulch trees up on all two. rest
and
of
the
the
rest of the
crew.
crew.
With Timmy,
Timmy,
Ting,
Ting,